Hello, hello, and welcome to this week's Expansive podcast. It's really great to have you with us. And this week we have a little bit of a change. Eric has become a lot more beautiful and he's looking a little bit more like a female. And we are joined by our producer, Robin, this week. Robin, how are you, darling?
Hello, guys. I'm good. I'm good. I was just telling John how beautiful the weather in Cape Town is. So, our Cape Town listeners, happy days for us. Winter's gone.
And funny enough, in Dubai, it's also wonderful. Winter's kicked in, summer's kicked in Cape Town. We're in a good time of the year. I actually
The
think
best.
April, May, September, and October are the best months to travel around the world. The summers and the
Absolutely.
winters are always a little bit harsh and a little bit too busy.
Mm,
So these really
mm,
are the traveling times as we go through through autumn and spring around the world. They're really just the best
yeah.
times. But
Yeah.
this week, Eric has moved into a new home. He doesn't have fiber installed yet, and we didn't want to hold back the podcast. And so we decided to do a little bit of a different podcast as we are in an experimental phase with the pod anyway. We thought this would be a great addition to it. And we got a whole range of different topics to talk about, all the way from the demonetization of money, the change of work, the political landscape when it comes to podcasts. But before we really kick into it, I just wanted to have a share around an experience I had this weekend, which was really
Mm,
interesting to me. And I
mm.
wrote a piece about it just because it affected me so much, this experience that I had. And
Wow.
I want to read the piece and then we can unpack it and I'll
So, is this
explain
in
exactly what
Dubai?
had happened. Yeah,
Is this
so
in Dubai?
what happened? Yeah, that's right. So what happened was I got invited to go for lunch and it's to a restaurant called Gigi, which is a very famous restaurant from Saint Tropez.
Mm.
And I'd heard about the restaurant. It's not something I'd ever been to, but I thought it's a birthday. I need to go and check it out. So I got invited. So I went there, and um, the number of Rolls Royces and Lamborghinis outside was actually comedic because there were so many of them.
Been higher than usual in Dubai.
Oh, yeah, yeah. This was like the pinnacle of wealthy in Dubai, which is already a wealthy city. And it
Yeah.
wasn't just Rolls Royces and Lamborghinis, it was Rolls Royces and Lamborghinis kitted up. And so an incredible amount of wealth. And
Yeah.
when I got to, and it's really not the sort of place I hang out in. It just
Yeah.
doesn't, it's not in my vibe. And so I got into the restaurant and it was an incredibly disappointing experience. And let me read you the piece that I wrote about it and then we'll unpack it.
Yeah.
So this is what I wrote about it. I said, and I haven't posted this, it's just been something that's been going on inside my head.
Mm.
I said, I spend a lot of time with a wide range of people, from employees to employers, from small time operators to global billionaires. And the more I see and interact with the ultra wealthy, one thing becomes increasingly clear to me. They are bored. They've
Mm.
maxed out the world of materialism, tried everything and anything, and now find themselves doing more of the same things we've labeled as success. More
Mm.
partying, dining at more expensive restaurants, holidaying at more luxurious hotels, shopping at even pricier brands, and on and on and on. All of it with no real end in sight. Of course, the less affluent, the middle class, and the upper class have their own challenges. So isn't meant as a critique of the ultra wealthy by no means. But having grown up without much, I always dreamed of what it would be like in those exclusive places, driving those cars, having those friends. And now that I have access, to be honest, I'm a bit disappointed that there's nothing there but more shiny, perhaps more luxurious, but ultimately just more boring. And the luxury of the future isn't about more, it's about enough. And enough is often lost on those who've made it their life's mission to accumulate more. And
Wow.
I, I sat in that restaurant, and the food was incredible, and the music was incredibly loud, and
Yeah.
people sat around the tables, bored, on their phones, with all that money, all
Wow.
that dolled up, all those clothes, and the word that came to me was vacuous. It was
Yeah.
vacuous. It was empty. And I was so disappointed because I just wanted it to be better. I wanted to be worth something. And also what happened is somehow I got involved in paying the bill, which I got invited to a birthday, but somehow I got invited to like pitch
That's
into the
so
bill.
wild.
Nice, eh?
Chill.
And everybody at the table was drinking and having a great time. I don't drink, so I wasn't drinking at
Yeah.
all. But my share of the bill came to 20,000 Rand, 5,000 dirham for a plate of food. I just ate a plate of food. So I walked
What?
away
Yo.
disappointed on so many different levels that
Yeah.
it was a huge impact. And I thought I'd share the sort of,
Yeah.
if you are craving to know what those worlds are like, the word that
Yeah.
comes to mind is vacuous. Vacuous.
It really does become almost like a dopamine chasing like reality where it's like you have, as you said, the nicest cars, the nicest houses, you've been to all the most beautiful places in the world. So what comes next? I feel like everyone always like automatically goes to these examples, but that's when you see things like Jeffrey Epstein and like the island,
Yes.
because people
And
just
P. Diddy. Yeah.
chasing and chasing,
Bored.
and then it gets bored. Yeah, it's
It's
boredom.
boring.
For the listeners, I grew up in the Middle East. I grew up in Bahrain, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump from Dubai. And I obviously grew up around incredible Middle Eastern wealth. And it really just does become a kind of just like a ladder game where it's like, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? And when does it end? And
So I
does it?
think what's happened for me is that the only way out is in.
Yeah,
And when you go in, your goal becomes peace, not more. And it doesn't
yeah,
mean you stop being ambitious. You can still be ambitious, but it's with more of a mission towards make an impact rather than it is just to be more for the sake of having more. And I often think
mm,
about the places that attract those sort of people, and those places are expensive cities, expensive
yeah,
holiday resorts. F1, Formula One is very much part of that, because in
yeah,
the world of materialism, what's faster than F1? Nothing. What's shinier than Dubai or Beijing?
yeah,
Nothing. What's
yeah,
bigger than Louis Vuitton and Gucci? Nothing. So
yeah,
this is the world that they're stuck in. And I actually felt sorry for them to a certain extent, because it was such a
yeah.
weird experience watching them sitting there on their phones, paying an exorbitant amount of money for food and alcohol with loud
Moving
music.
places.
I was like, oh my
Yeah,
God. And you know what the problem is, Rob? Is like, not the problem, but I used to be one of those people. Like, I was so excited to go to those places. I was like, oh,
yeah,
people are going to see me. But thank
yeah,
God I went bankrupt. That's what saved me. My bankruptcy saved me to
yeah.
start to discover something new rather than keep chasing that scenario. And you always say there's a silver lining, but only 15 years after my bankruptcy do I see the silver lining. Now I see the silver lining.
Retrospectively.
Yeah,
Yeah.
retrospect. Anyway,
Did you at least have any like interesting conversations with people? Like,
no,
what was like the intellectual conversational level?
no, zero,
None.
zero. It's all
Yeah,
show and tell. It's all show and
yeah,
tell. It's all about see me. This is what I've done. This is how I've done it. This is where I've come from. This is like, and
yeah,
so no, it wasn't. It wasn't at all, and it was disappointing. And that's really not what Dubai is about. Those are like pockets of Dubai, but there's many amazing people in Dubai, and my usual friends are very different to those. And so that was a very
yeah,
unique experience. But I thought I'd share
yeah.
it just to give some insights that there's really nothing out there. Really,
Yeah.
nothing.
I always get quite upset when people like talk about Dubai and they're like, oh, it's just so materialistic and full of like Russian hookers and da da da. Because
Yeah,
I'm the same. Like I've experienced such beautiful pockets of Dubai in the Middle East, and
amazing,
that yeah,
amazing people
the
here.
most generous people in the whole world.
Yeah, yeah,
I
they really
I
are
admire
amazing.
them.
So let's get on to the first sort of story today about tech. And I saw something shared online about how this guy used AI to
Mm,
apply for 1,000 jobs and landed 50 interviews in 24 hours. And you think about that and you think to yourself, wow, other people are like rudimentary emailing and trying to get interviews. And
cover
that's what
letters.
this guy just used AI and he applied for 1,000 jobs, got 24 interviews. And it just gets you to understand that the idea of work and
Yeah,
applying for work and actually even servicing the job, a lot of people are using AI to service their skills or whatever it is that's required for that job. And so the idea of adding value in that old world, in the old way, is becoming
yeah,
less and less valuable in many different ways, right?
yeah,
And then and
yeah,
then next to that story, we started to see that this week a story came out about a new meme coin, and that's for if people are not listening, that's like cryptocurrency with a coin that really has no asset below it or beneath it. And what has happened is that there's been a new meme coin that's been created called Goatseus Maximus. And the way that this meme coin has been created is an incredible story, because some
Mm,
guy called Andy Irie from New Zealand created two Claude chat rooms. So Claude is another ChatGPT kind of business or kind of
mm,
platform. So he created this Claude chat room that was speaking to another Claude chat room, and he called it infinite back rooms or infinite chat rooms. And so what happened is that these two Claudes started to talk to each other and started to really, like, it's a forever conversation. It's never ending. But he also unshackled them. In other words, he gave them access to Twitter and a whole other range of different things. And what these two Claudes started to do was create a X or Twitter account called Goatseus Maximus. And this Goatseus Maximus started to create quite a following on Twitter. And as it started to create this following and started to grow and grow and grow, it created a meme coin. And this meme coin last week was valued at $700 million in just 2 weeks of this AI having been launched. And so think about this. Think about work being applied by a
mm.
thousand different times by AI. Now think about AI creating a meme coin that's worth $700 million. This is the dissolving of work and
Yeah,
money all at the same time. It's like, what is money worth when AI can make so much of it? It's almost like it becomes demonetized. In fact, money becomes demonetized. And what does
yeah,
it mean when somebody can apply for 1,000 jobs and get 50 interviews in 24 hours? It's just the work itself is becoming irrelevant in many ways. And
absolutely.
so there's a huge shift. And I think what 2025 is going to do is really start to build traction, and the
Mm,
momentum of AI is going to kick in, and we're going to start
yeah,
to see some serious changes starting to come to the corporate world. We've been playing with ChatGPT, making our email sound
yeah,
better, but we're about to see a whole new version of what AI is going to do. And another way to think about this is it's called agentic thinking AI. And this is
yeah.
going to be the next phase of AI, past generative AI, which is where we are kind of
Mm,
right now, predictive and
mm,
generative. But we're moving to something called agentic thinking. And what agentic thinking AI is, it's self propelling, self healing, self teaching, self collaborating, self. And agentic thinking can be seen now with this Goatseus Maximus, where AI itself created the chat room, created the Twitter handle, created the meme coin, created the financing, blah, 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 $700 million.
like they literally have
Yeah,
created like a piece of culture
yeah,
here.
they
It's
have.
it's insane.
That's right.
It's insane.
Yeah, they've created a whole new culture around this meme coins, and it's the dissolving of our structures right in front of our eyes, and this is just happening one bit at a time. But one bit at a time, we're going to turn around, and the whole thing would have shifted dramatically.
Yeah.
So
It's completely taking out that like self motivation and being like, cool, I can click a button. What other skills am I going to bring to the table now?
exactly, like
And
if
it,
you just
yeah,
clicking a button and 1,000 interviews are happening, like think about that. Like
oh my
it
God.
means nothing, but think about the
Yeah,
amount of entertainment you have. You don't watch anything, because there's so much
no,
of it. It's like Twitter,
yeah,
and TikTok and Instagram and
yeah,
Netflix
yeah,
and
yeah.
Apple and Prime and
Yeah.
just
It's
it's nonstop.
insane. Like
Yeah,
sometimes I'm like, I need to switch from my big screen to my little screen and then my medium screen. Like
yeah. So
it's
screen after
it's
screen and
a
watching
lot.
the same things. So another thing that happened this week was Donald Trump was on Joe Rogan, and it was
Mm-hmm.
the biggest news. I think so far it's had like 30, 40 million views. And whatever you think of Trump and whatever you think of Rogan is actually quite irrelevant when the way we want to think about it is how important podcasts have become. This is really the biggest story here, is that these political leaders aren't really going on CNN. Joe Rogan has got thousands of times more views than CNN, and millions of more views, in fact. And to have Donald Trump on there, and I think the interview was, some of it was good, some of it was rubbish. But
Yeah,
I guess any political person that gets onto any interview, some of it's rubbish and some of it's good. It just depends on how
yeah,
your allegiances lie with them. And I'm really just more interested in the fact that Joe Rogan having Donald Trump on it has been the hugest story. Just the fact that we've had a presidential candidate on Joe Rogan in a podcast. So that's a really amazing thing for us to see podcasts grow so much and become so popular
yeah,
and gathering such
yeah.
momentum.
The fact that Donald Trump actually went to Joe Rogan's studio in Austin, Texas, like traveled there, like Kamala went on Call Her Daddy, a podcast with Alex Cooper, and Alex Cooper flew to Vegas and like did it in a hotel room. But Joe Rogan was like, if you want to come on my podcast, you can come to me. And he's also reached out to Harris, being like, come on my podcast, even though Trump was like, Harris would be on the floor if she was here. But he was like, no, I have reached out to her, but she's saying, I only have an hour for you and you have to come to me. And Joe Rogan's like, I don't need to do that. A lot of people are calling like the Joe Rogan kind of podcasting sphere as the manosphere. So it's like, it's such a direct line to men. You know, men aren't really as much of consumers as culture as women are. Like women really are like TV shows and reality shows and, you know, podcasts. And I think getting that direct line into male brains is crazy. And it's something that Joe Rogan just like corners the market on. Like he is a genius.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think he's truly curious about topics. He obviously has his own opinion, but I really appreciate the fact that he asks deep questions from all sorts of different people. And what
Yeah.
he keeps saying is, I just want to have a conversation with somebody. I don't need to interrogate them. I just want to talk to them. And he said the
Yeah.
problem with getting Kamala is that you'd have too many people around the interview determining what you're interviewing. He says it doesn't
Yeah.
allow me to just have a conversation with them. And so it doesn't
Yeah.
actually fit my style of interviewing because I'm not
Yeah.
trying to catch them out. I really just want to talk to them as a human to human. And I think that's
Yeah.
really great. So,
Instead of like having these big debates where it's like politicians like talking
yeah,
to Trump, AOC and stuff, it was just a normal dude. Like Joe Rogan
yeah,
was just a normal guy. And when
yeah,
like they were talking about his ear, like getting like swiped with the bullet, and he was like, "There's no scar there though." Anyway, and just like moved on, like not being like you're lying, was just like that's interesting because I hunt a lot, but anyway. And so it was just like little things like that that was so brilliant and just so chilled. And podcasting is such a chilled format, so
yeah.
it's risky for politicians to go on because
Yeah,
they're
and look, I mean, we're 5, 6 days away from the world taking one side or the other side, and it's going to be quite a chaotic thing. And the funny thing is I'm flying to America next week, so like I'm flying into the storm. So it's going to be
no
quite
way.
an interesting thing to arrive and see what's going on because I imagine there should be some upheaval if one side wins or the other. There'll be something would be happening. You know, I don't think it's going to go quietly. So another story that's really been doing the rounds, which I really love, is the fact that we're using new technology to find old ancient cities. And not just in Mexico, but we are seeing this right across Guatemala, Colombia.
Mm,
And what we're starting to see is that they're using LiDAR to like sort of scan the forests and the jungles. And they're finding massive cities that have been overgrown. And LiDAR is this incredible technology that many of the self-driving cars are utilizing. And what it does, it sends out it's almost like an immediate light that's sent out and then reflects back to the car, telling it what it should do and how it should do it. So it's constantly
mm,
feeling its surroundings. And so they're using that set of technology, bouncing it down into the jungles. And then what's coming back is showing what's happening actually under the trees. And so we're
that's
about
crazy.
to discover new ancient civilizations with new massive cities. And we've always thought that Machu Picchu was sort of the pinnacle of what they discovered. But now we're starting to realize that Machu Picchu was just one of the
Yeah.
hundreds of cities with thousands of square kilometers of civilization and systems. And they're just way ahead of more than anything that we've ever expected. Robin, have you
Yeah.
watched any of Graham Hancock's yeah, Graham. It's just
I'm
called
so
Ancient
glad you
History,
asked me
right?
that.
Yeah.
I am probably Graham Hancock's number one fan. When I was
Yes.
19, I applied to be a research assistant for him on one of his like
Wow.
expeditions because I studied anthropology at uni, so I am just
Right.
obsessed with this. And it was exactly what I was going to bring up because he argues for the peopling of the Americas way before Orthodox
Yes.
historians do. And this is exactly the evidence where he's like, there are literally mass civilizations in Mexico before anyone says that, you know, anyone was intelligent. And they have structures and they have systems, they have economics and they have engineering. Like after uni, I backpacked around South America and I went up to Machu Picchu. Literally unbelievable. And engineers now
Mind
say
blowing.
that their aqueduct system, they wouldn't be able to create one
No.
as
Yes.
it blows my
But
mind.
even some of the rocks up there, like 60, 70 tons, they also don't know how they would. Even in today's
No.
technology, you couldn't get those rocks up there.
Truly,
So
I mean,
they,
let's not even get onto the pyramids.
yeah, let's not even get there. But I think what they had and some of the technology that's been floated around was using sound technology that we don't quite have yet. And
Sure.
what I've seen is they're using the sound technology to put out fires. And so, yeah, so these fire, like some fire departments aren't using water, but sound. And so they're putting out these sound vibrations that actually switch off fires. And if you think about
Sure.
sound in itself, you realize that as human beings, we only hear a very minuscule linear
Yeah.
range of sound. And
Mm,
you think about how tigers can growl and other animals can
mm,
hear them, but we can't, or dogs can hear whistles. And so
mm.
what we see is with sound, you can actually move things. You can move um, fire and switch it off, for example.
Wow.
But you can move water, you can move sand. But if you think about this technology and extrapolate it like much more technologically advanced, you could almost like
Mm.
move things with it. But we don't
Yeah.
quite understand the technology yet. And I think that once we start to bring AI in and its
Yeah.
intelligence starts to move towards the 1,000+ IQ points, I think that
Yeah.
sort of technology and theories will start to become more available to us to start to engage with once AI really starts to kick in.
Sure. It makes sense, but also blows my mind simultaneously at the same
Of course,
time.
because it's so unfamiliar for us to not even understand. And I think if you think about it, when electricity was introduced, it was almost like witchcraft in many different ways. And we still don't
Yeah.
quite understand how electricity works. I mean, I definitely
Oh,
don't. We don't
don't
quite
ask me.
understand how the internet works.
A
I still
phone?
don't understand it.
What?
Yeah, I
How
still
does a
don't get
phone
it.
work?
Exactly. So
Do you
when we
remember the
think of, yeah,
first time you saw a computer,
yes, it was
or that you used a computer?
I used a computer. Yeah, my mom and dad, we all had one computer at home, and yeah, we used to go. We didn't know what to do on it, to be honest. I mean, like,
Yeah.
there was no like email addresses, or I remember the first time I went traveling in Thailand. It was '97, and I was going for 6 weeks to go travel in Thailand. And my mom
Vibes.
said to me, how are we gonna stay in touch with you?" I said, "Mom, there's this new thing called Hotmail. And if you get a Hotmail email address, what I'll do is when I'm there, I'll just go into an internet cafe and get hold of you." And so from the internet cafe, we used to send an email, just say, "Hey, everything's cool, we're alive, everything's fine, and we all good." And in fact, what happened is when we were traveling between one of the islands, one of the yachts, not yachts, ferries went down. A whole bunch of travelers died. And so I emailed my mom and said, "Look, don't worry, I'm fine." She's like, "I have no idea. I didn't even see that on the news. Are you going to be okay?" I was like, yeah, I'm fine. We made it. We made it. Other people didn't, unfortunately.
That's so
So
wild. And now, if that was today, it would be like marked safe in Thailand. Like
that's
it's
right.
really,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
so
That was a long
wild.
time
It's
ago.
given,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
we call that BG, which is before Google.
oh,
So
BG, what a
yeah, we're
time.
talking BG. What a time! What a time!
What
We
a
were
time
all
to be
alone.
alive, truly.
Yes, exactly. So, look, let's
Yeah.
talk about the last story around data. And I think it's a really interesting story. As we
Yeah.
start to pick up on AI, starting to pick up more patterns and understanding patterns much better than we can, we've now
Mm,
started to see that AI is being used to pick up on new data points coming out of businesses, coming out of languages, coming out of healthcare. All of it is really starting to shift our understanding of the data itself because of how AI is picking up on these data points. Now, one of the most
mm,
interesting examples I use in my talks is how AI is going to decipher animal language. And over the next sort of year or so, what we're going to have is these earphones that will do immediate translation from Korean to German, German to English, English to French, whatever the case may be. And if you think about it, all languages are just noises that are
mm,
enunciated with one way or other, with silence between them. And so, in
mm,
exactly the same way, we're using AI to pick up the patterns of animal languages and getting us to
yeah,
speak to animals real soon. And then, not then, but as well as having these AIs break down data inside businesses to start to help people make better decisions about their
mm,
businesses, picking up the patterns of what they need to do. And this is
mm,
really going to be an amazing technology
mm,
that's going to help many businesses, one, make better decisions, but two, realize that as human beings, our ability to make strategic decisions is actually quite futile. compared
Mm.
to the amount of level of understanding that AI brings to the table. Tell me more about the story that you found for us.
Well, approximately 75% of data that companies collect remain unused, which blows my mind because we all speak about how data is the new precious metal and data mining and everyone's data, data, data. And yet we only use 25% of it, which is pretty crazy. But then the thing that really stuck out to me with this story is the fact that storytelling, which is such a ancient human tendency to do, is almost going like hand in hand with AI.
With
So as
AI.
we're like going like modernizing and going into the future so hectically, we're also kind of regressing a little bit where people want to tell stories and tell their ideas not just on a text message, it's visual.
I don't know. I wouldn't call it regressing. I would call it going back to the basics, as in
Yes,
that
not
human,
yeah, not
yeah, yeah,
regressing.
regressing as a negative
Like
connotation attached to it. I
yeah,
actually
yeah,
think
yeah.
it's a positive. I think
Yeah,
it's a
yeah, it
big
is a
positive.
positive.
Yeah, it's a big
Yeah,
positive. Because I think in the
yeah,
age of AI, human connection will become really, really more sought after. If you're
yeah,
able to tell better stories using AI, and still telling the story, but having a benefit of having that data points being collected and pattern recognition
yeah,
happening, you just become a better storyteller. And I think it's a
yeah,
huge plus because I think storytelling's become better maybe with electricity because we have access to more data points through the internet and
yeah,
we can maybe
yeah.
zoom ourselves across the world and tell more people's stories. I think this is
Mm,
just adding another layer that allows us to be better at what we do and
yeah,
make more connections that more people can benefit from when you are telling those stories. So
yeah.
interesting week. Interesting that so much is happening around discovering ancient cities and
I love
utilizing
it.
AI to figure out new data points and new storytelling, meme coins being created and creating close to $1 billion market cap, people applying for work in brand new ways. Just in every touch point of our lives, we are starting to see a massive shift up. And I think 2025 is going to be almost like an accentuation or an extrapolation with exponentiality as we starting
Yeah,
to move into 2025, as AI starts to catch its grip and its
yeah.
momentum.
I think so.
So
And I
exciting
also
times.
think,
And I'd like
yeah,
to end off with the idea that your ability to engage with it in an optimistic way just allows you to be front footed instead of
yeah,
back footed. And in order
yeah,
to be expansive and move into the future, you would be hugely rewarded for exposing yourself to new data points, new stories, and new ideas of how you can apply this to your existing life, how you can apply it to tomorrow's life, and how you can apply it to yourself just to have a more peaceful, more abundant, and more adaptable life. And that's really what the expansive is all about. And so, Robin, thank you so much for joining us and making Eric look so pretty. For the first time ever, Eric has been pretty on this podcast. And I only say this because Eric is not ugly. I do mock Eric all the time because he's so bloody good looking, the bastard. Any parting words from you, Robs?
No, just to the listeners, thanks so much for being here every week with us. I enjoy producing this podcast immensely. I have so much fun, and hearing all of your guys' amazing feedback just makes it so rewarding and so worthwhile. So, thanks for having me. And
Awesome.
yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's great to have you, Robin, and to everybody out there. If you please share this podcast with somebody you think that might benefit from it, check us out across all our socials. And until next week, stay expansive.